You've heard the conventional view.
Now prepare yourself to hear the other side.
High school teachers Mike Margison and Justin Spears bring you the alternative view you didn't get in the classroom. Now here they are, Margison, and Spears.
Well, good Friday to everybody. Coming to you live episode of The Other Side, riding solo today. That's right. Just me, Justin Spears here with you. Had a day off today. Where we teach, we are on a trimester schedule. And so we were afforded a day off here, which was much, much needed. We come to this point in the time where getting ready for that home stretch of the school year. And it's just really nice to be able to get a day in here to get your thoughts collected and get ready for this last trimester. I'm looking forward to it. I've got some personal changes that are coming up as well. Going to be coaching boys golf at the high school as well. So I'm excited about that. That'll be something I've not done before. So I'm looking forward to working with some of the kids there on the golf course. And that's going to be a little bit of a time consumption there, but something I'm definitely looking forward to. And just going back to teaching 2 classes this last trimester, I had 3 classes. I had government, econ, and a world history geography class. So I drop the world history class and get to stick to government and economics. So it's always an interesting time in school this 3rd trimester, especially having seniors, right? Because you're really battling 2 different things going on. You've got apathy, senioritis, as they like to refer to it as, and you're just really trying to pull the kids across and keep them engaged. And really what I try to do is I try to encourage the seniors to understand that you got to develop this work ethic now when you really don't want to work, when you really don't want to be at school. This is the time that you need to buckle down and put a little bit more effort into what you've got going on. Because I tell them all the time, if you're able to do that, you're going to be in much better shape come next year if you're going off to college, or even if you're entering into the workforce, right? You're going to have hopefully hit the ground running here a little bit. So you've got that going. And then you've also got the ones who are, really doing all they can. Sometimes they don't do all they can, but they're really trying to make sure that they get through the class, because both government and economics are required courses for graduation. So that's something else too there that, you're working with the kids on that. So it's always a fun time. It's getting a little bit warmer, getting a little bit more light in here and daylight in during the days and stuff too. So a little bit more excitement as we build toward the end of the school year. So being at home here today, I had an opportunity this morning to take part in a segment on a radio show based out of Utah, K-Talk Radio. I'll link to that on our Other Side pages through social media, through Facebook and Twitter, which, by the way, if you have not had an opportunity to check us out on either of those platforms, I highly, highly encourage you to do that. We would love to be able to engage with you through there. On Twitter, we're at TOS_podcast. And on Facebook, we're at facebook.com/TOS podcast, all one word. And you can get us through email, Margison and Spears, that's all one word, at gmail.com. So there's a lot of different ways that you can reach out to us. I'm on social media personally as well, Justin Spears 4 on Twitter, and facebook.com/Justin Spears 4. So you can find me in a lot of different avenues to touch base with us. So highly encourage you, if you have questions or comments about the show. We're doing a lot of things here with this. We're really trying to improve our reach. We're trying to get conversations started. That's really what this is all about. This is not a show designed to lecture at people or tell people we're right, you're wrong. Certainly we present our side, the other side, that you wouldn't commonly hear either in a classroom or in your daily life. But that's really just to be thought-provoking. It's to kind of grab your attention and say, wait a second, I haven't thought about that. I haven't considered that, or I didn't hear that in my education, or I haven't heard that, in the media. And so that's really, guys, what this is all about. So I hope if you've taken to the show, you're catching up on some previous episodes, that you're sensing that as you listen. And we're always looking for feedback. So please, by all means, if you have any suggestions, comments, or anything, feel free to reach out to us. So having got all that out of the way, I wanted to talk a little bit today about this hot button issue. It's white hot right now, obviously, with the events of what happened down in Florida. And unfortunately, the news of yet another incident, I believe in Kentucky yesterday, where 2 students were killed and several others were injured of school shootings. And it's obviously ignited a debate about gun control and what needs to be done to help prevent and stop these. And by and large, depending upon your sources of information, whether they be the mainstream media or just conversations that you're having with people or through social media, I get the sense, at least from my viewpoint, that I would venture to say probably 80 to 90% of the coverage is from a gun control perspective. Right? And what do we need to do from a gun control perspective to minimize or reduce the likelihood that this happens again? And I don't want to spend a whole lot of time here today going through that, other than to say this, and maybe this I'll bring this back a little bit to what I'm going to mention here in just a moment about the president's idea of arming teachers. But to me, it is very inconsistent and shaky ground for people who are screaming for gun control, right? Whatever that is, however you define gun control, and it runs the gamut. You get the reactionaries who say, well, you're taking every gun away and we're not going to be able to own a gun, and you're erasing the Second Amendment, to people who are saying, no, we just want a common sense regulations. We want to ban certain this or that, AR, AK, bump stocks, certain ammunitions, whatever it might be, anywhere in between, right? To me, again, it seems very inconsistent and shaky to have that position. And here's why. For no other reason than this. When Donald Trump was elected into office, we heard a lot of people refer to him as, Hitler and reincarnated, a Nazi, a sexist, a bigot, a homophobe, all of these different labels and adjectives to describe the president. And my question is very simple. And it's this: why on earth would you want to give that man and his government more authority to be able to de-arm, keep you from potentially being able to arm yourself? Now, again, some people are going to say, well, we're not talking about taking all guns away. But again, if you're regulating guns, weapons, arms, whatever word you want to use to describe them, you are by nature preventing somebody from being able to protect themselves in the way that they see best fit. That's the beauty of the Second Amendment, whether you want to read it from a strict constructionist perspective or a more activist position. Obviously, the founders would not have known about the style of weapons that we have today, but they did know this, and this is the intent of the Second Amendment. I don't think there's any other way that you could argue this. People want to talk about hunting and personal protection, but the impetus of the Second Amendment deals with being able to protect yourself from the government, right? Think about what had just gone on in the country and the whole notion of, putting together this ragtag militia and having people be able to take up arms and fight back against an oppressive government. And that's really, I think, the idea here of what the Second Amendment is all about, being able to protect yourself, not just from another citizen, not just from your neighbor or somebody who's out to rob you, or you happen to be walking through a convenience store or a shopping mall and somebody does something bad and you've got the means to be able to protect yourself. That's all fabricated, and it's not all bad. Some of that is good, and we need that to protect our life. But really, the spirit of this is to say, look, if your government ever becomes oppressive, you're going to need a way to be able to take up arms and fight back. Because what else are you going to be able to do? If the government is able to restrict and de-arm its citizens, what's going to happen when the federal government oversteps its boundaries and starts to do things like what we've seen in other oppressive regimes? And again, I go right back to what I said a minute ago. These are the same people who have called our current president Hitler, right? So if you truly believe that in your heart of hearts, why on earth would you want to do something to limit yourself from being able to defend and protect yourself if he truly is that kind of an abusive, oppressive dictator tyrant, right? So I just wanted to get that kind of out of the way there. Although that's not really what I wanted to focus on here. What I really wanted to talk about is the issue at hand here with these school shootings. And, I mentioned on the radio this morning that we have a problem in society today with finding what I call original cause. And let me explain what I mean by that. What I mean by this is that we have an innate desire to want to find the easiest path to a solution on something. And what that oftentimes means is that we jump in to the middle or end of whatever it is that's going on. So since we're obviously talking about school shootings, let's just use this as an example, because I think oftentimes what happens here too is that people try to use analogies. And analogies are dangerous in that they're not a one-to-one. They're not apples to apples sometimes, right? So I don't want to try to throw in some fabricated example to try to relate this to you. I just want to use the situation at hand. And so what do we hear about with school shootings? Well, we hear people talk about obviously looking at, well, how did this happen? How did this guy get into school? How did he get his hands on all of these weapons? What was going on with the school resource officer? All this, that, and the other. But that's not where the conversation needs to be. Now, maybe in the immediate, yes, we do have to talk about protection, procedures, defending, and I'll address that here towards the end today. But what I want to spend the majority of our time talking about is getting to the root of this. Because if you have ever cut a weed out and you try to chop it off and not get down to the roots of it, it's going to come back. So let's get down to the roots here of what is going on. These people who are committing these heinous acts are mentally unstable. Why? Why are they mentally unstable? What is causing this? Now, I have read social media posts that have advocated that a lot of this comes from the fact that the home is unstable. I wholeheartedly agree. When you look at the effects of living in modern society today, whether you want to look at it from the idea of a two-parent income earner, which puts both mom and dad out of the house, and kids are shuffled off for the most of the day and are being influenced by outside things, that has certainly an effect. We could talk about the role of social media and of just media in general, whether it be video games, television, what have you, that we are remote parents, that we are allowing our kids to be reared through means outside of what we should be instilling and planting into them. And that doesn't even begin to touch upon abuse, substance abuse. I have just heard heartbreaking stories of kids who are in my building that have horrible, horrible living conditions that nobody in general, let alone a 15, 16, 17-year-old student, a child, should have to live through. So yes, that is a part of it. But we also have to talk about the role of school. And I know this is uncomfortable, and I want to clarify this by saying, as being a public school instructor, that I am not necessarily taking shots at individuals in the system. Although I do think that there are many in the system that contribute to this, when you defend the system and when you double down on the system and place all of your hope in what we are currently doing today, yes, I'm going to call a spade a spade. And if you feel like this is, the way to do it, and you feel like what our modern education system is providing is the right thing, I'm gonna call you out on that, because I wholeheartedly disagree. And what I mean by this is, and again, I outlined this in what I talked about this morning on the radio. I have a fourth and a second grade students, children, 10 and soon to be 8. And my oldest in his education has really had it rough as far as learning how to play school. And what I mean by that is, to clarify those comments, is trying to learn to play the game of sitting crisscross applesauce on the floor, listening to the teacher read a book, sitting still, not fidgeting, not daydreaming and wandering off, keeping, still, right? And then that's transitioned as he's got a little bit older into now being crammed into a desk and having to listen to a teacher give direct instruction on, how to do certain things in the classroom, which, by the way, the standards, what it is that these kids are learning, right? It also that's part of this as well, and I'll get to that here in just a moment. But just to kind of focus in here on the structure of school. Now, I know well-intentioned people will say, well, we're instilling in them, right, how to be good citizens, right? They have citizenship grades that are all about, learning to be quiet, keep your hands to yourself, sit at attention, listen, attain to your work, do this, don't do that, turning them into little robots, good little soldiers. And that's not what life should be like for a 10-year-old boy or girl for that matter. Girls, I think can attain to that a little bit better, but that still isn't a reason that they should be forced to have to go through this as well. And so it's no surprise if you happen to be listening to this and my oldest son, he's a very kinesthetic learner. He's a very kinesthetic boy. He likes to move. He likes to be, use his mind and let his imagination wander. And he's playing with characters at home all the time, playing out scenarios, and he's just kind of moving around a lot. And so that doesn't fit well into the modern school. Now back, when I was in school 25, 30 years ago, yeah, that was what it was like. We were out playing, and even in the classroom, right? We were moving through stations, and we were building things, and we were learning about ourselves, and we were learning how to get along with others. And, yeah, we picked up some knowledge on the way, but I know for a fact that I was not being asked to, for example, as one of the fourth grade math standards is asking our students today to do, which is to basically analyze algebraic equations. My fourth grade son has math standards on geometry. We weren't introduced to geometry stuff until at least late middle school, if not high school. But we're asking fourth graders to identify obtuse and acute angles and things of that nature. And so we've pushed these standards, back or forward, however you want to look at it, onto them younger. Let's just put it that way. And when you couple that, what I've just laid out for you, with high stakes testing. Now, I know a lot of public school educators are not in agreement with this. So again, that's why I was saying earlier, I'm not calling out educators. I can't really think of anyone off the top of my head who's in public education that advocates for stuff like end of course assessments, NWEA, ISTEP, as a good model for assessing the growth of a student. But when you couple the model of what school looks like today, along with that, it is absolutely placing undue stress on our kids. My fourth grade son is stressed out about school already because he knows the importance of ISTEP, because it's been hammered into him by the system. And he knows the importance of other standardized tests and just testing in general, testing in the classroom. I mean, he has spelling tests, he has geography tests, he has, all these other different ways in which he is assessed, and it's just nonstop. There's never time for them to breathe and just be kids, it seems like. And when there is, it's just a rare occasion for them to go through that. So we're putting this on the kids at an early age. And then, as I said, too, yes, there is a home component. Just in my home group at my church last night, we were talking a little bit about the role of college and how most of us in our home group were first generation college goers. And we were, kind of going around and talking about our experience of going to college. And was it an expectation versus, hey, if you attain to it, that's great. And that's spilled over to where we see record amount of interest and enrollment in schools, and just this idea of college not even being an option. It's just something you're going to do, because if you're going to do anything with your life, you're going to go to college. That places a lot of pressure and stress on kids. And that's absolutely a false narrative. There are many, many career fields out there that do not require a college degree. If you went and got a degree, a management degree or something along those lines, yeah, I'm sure it would help. But there are many, many skill-based positions where these kids that identify as non-college driven students, and I see it all the time, they should be given opportunities to go into a co-op program, a vocational program, an apprenticeship program, something where they can start learning skills right away instead of being crammed into a higher level math class that some arbitrary bureaucrat at the Department of Education has said, we deem that you need this before you can graduate. I don't understand the point of that. When a kid is already struggling to be able to pass a standard math class and you want to continue semester, year after year, shoving them into more math classes, what is the purpose of that, right? Now, I know math teachers will, obviously fight for, the understanding of math as an important topic. And I'm not meaning to minimalize that at all. Math is a very important skill. It teaches problem solving, it teaches you how to organize information and facts and things of that nature. But could those skills not be acquired through project-based and learning-based initiatives? Couldn't somebody who has a desire to want to learn about automobiles go into an auto mechanic workshop and learn math skills? Or somebody that wants to obtain to a position of being a carpenter, obtain math skills that are of importance through working on wood and things of that nature? Even people who want to go into fine arts programs, they can acquire those same skills in various different ways. There's lots of creative ways in which we can get kids the skills that they need in math and language arts. And then the same thing is true for language arts, by the way. You could have students reading and writing on publications in their field, or writing reflective pieces on what they've done, and get them those same skills. But instead, we say, no, your day is going to look like this. It's going to consist of 6 hours of moving from period to period, sitting in a classroom, listening to a teacher provide direct instruction or giving you busy work tasks so that they can meet certain criteria of what it looks like to provide instruction to the student. And again, I say this as a social studies teacher, where I look at my students who walk into my government class, and I can tell you easily that 80 to 90% of them don't want to be there. Now, people say, well, isn't it important to teach them civics? Yes, of course it is. But I could look at a kid who wants to aspire again to work in the automotive industry, or be a plumber or an electrician, or whatever service-based industry they want to go into, and teach them the skills of what it means to be a good citizen through that lens. And if they want to come to me and learn a little bit more about government, or if they want to come to me and learn a little bit more about economics, I'm there. And I'd be willing to sit down and provide them a curriculum and let them work through it on their own pace, where they can sit down and dedicate time to it. And if they do it, they achieve the credit and they're better for it. But if they don't, then they don't. And that's not any different than the current model that we have now. People always say, well, gosh, if we broke up the current model, how would we hold kids accountable? How would you go to an open model where kids would just be able to float around during the day, and maybe somebody would dedicate 2 to 3 hours down in the theater area where they're working on production and performance and producing and writing and editing? Let them do that. If that's their passion and desire, let them do it now, because we may be going through a period of time in their lives where they're looking at this and they're going, wow, this is fantastic. I want to do this, right? And so the model of school is what I think absolutely is not being addressed here. What is this doing to the mental health of our students? And I encourage you to think about that. On top of that as well, because of the increased amount of stress and pressure, you have people who, quite frankly, are unqualified to be able to handle the level of stress and pressure that these kids are under. Both teachers, administrators, guidance counselors. We are not certified mental health therapists. We're not. We can listen to kids and we can refer kids, but we're the boots on the ground. And so we listen to a lot of what these kids have to say, and we see a lot of what they go through, but yet in a lot of ways, I feel like we're grossly ill prepared to be able to handle this. And I think that's unfair on teachers and students as well, because you just never really know. Right? You don't want to overstep boundaries. You don't want to point fingers. You don't want to put a kid in an awkward position of, calling them out on something. You don't want to violate trust. And it's very complicated and messy, right? And so there's that aspect to it as well. And so I think that is something that is grossly overlooked in this. And I want to encourage you to think about that a little bit. And I hope that passage there will do that for you. Now, I want to wrap up here as I start to wrap the show up a little bit with getting you to think about the idea that the president has pitched here of arming teachers in the building to help, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, either discourage people from going in and identifying these targets as these soft targets of schools. What would that do? Would somebody who wants to potentially commit one of these atrocities, would they think twice about it if they knew that, for what I think the number he used, 20% of the staff of a building was armed? Would that deter them? I don't know. I would like to think so. Yeah, I would like to think that, but it's hard to tell because the people who are doing these aren't in a logical mental state. They're not rational. They're going in, for lack of a better term, with their guns blazing. I mean, and I don't mean that in a funny way. I mean it is like they are enraged beyond thinking logically. So, somebody who is in the mental state, like a Cruz was down in Florida, even if he knew that 20% of the staff of that building was armed, would that still stop him from going in? I don't know. I don't know if that would happen or not, right? I mean, certainly people are armed in society, and yet crime occurs all the time. Now, I'd like to think it would cause somebody to think twice about it, but I don't know that for a fact. And so that leads me to the next conclusion that I have here, and what I would tell you is my overall opinion on this, and that is I don't know that it's worth it. I don't know that it is worth it to allow teachers to be able to carry weapons. And here's the other thing that I think is vitally important to understand about this as well. Teachers are human beings. We too are subject to the stress and pressures of life. And I know that teachers can go through very hard times. And so now you've potentially armed a teacher that could be in a really, really rough place in their life. Maybe they're going through a divorce. Maybe they're going through financial hardship. Maybe they're having a hard time. They're living paycheck to paycheck. Maybe they're having trouble with their kids at home. Do you really want to have somebody in the school with a weapon that could snap? At least with an outside intruder, there is procedures and stuff in place that can prevent them potentially from getting in. With arming a teacher, there's no way of knowing. If they get in the building and they have got a gun, nobody's going to think, oh, well, that person's really having a bad day. They can't come into school today with their gun. That's going to be a very difficult thing to be able to handle and work with there. And so, that to me, I think is really the thing that we have to think about with this, along with the fact that, look, teachers are government employees. So, what if a teacher is put through government training program and they're put in a position where a kid is getting out of hand? Where do you draw the line? If somebody is physically assaulting a teacher, if they're throwing books and desks and things of that nature, we're currently taught a CPI model at our school where we are not to engage physically with students whatsoever, even when they are in that fit of a rage there, that we are to go get the school resource officer and other administration to handle that. But if somebody is, physically attacking somebody, and look, we had some high profile cases here in Indiana a couple years ago where a male student was just beating the crap out of a female student. Would it be justifiable for a teacher to pull their weapon on that kid? And if he stopped or didn't stop, would they feel justified to protect the other student and fire on that student? Where would you draw the line on that? And you're going to, again, give the government more control on saying of those matters, right? So there's just a lot of slippery slopes and uncertainties with this that I don't think justifies at this point allowing teachers the right to conceal or openly carry in the building. Now, I am all for, as I mentioned at the beginning, being able to protect yourself and the Second Amendment. I don't own a weapon. I've never owned a weapon. I've only fired a gun once in my life. It was out, kind of in the country. We were just shooting a gun at a target. So I'm not a card-carrying NRA member, or anything of that nature. But I do adhere to everybody's right through protected right through the Constitution to carry weapons and protect yourself, both from, again, private citizens, but more importantly, as a means to be able to protect yourself should you need it from the government as well. And so if you're going to arm more people in the schools, I think that is just a slippery slope and a bad idea. So again, you feel free to agree, disagree with that. Hopefully that kind of plants something maybe in your mind that you hadn't heard talked about through the mainstream media or on social media yet. I would encourage any feedback that you could give me on that. If you agree, disagree, let me know. Hit us up on our Facebook, Twitter. Hit me up on my personal Facebook or Twitter, or let us know on email. So. Like I said, I was at home today, wanted to run through that, had the appearance this morning on radio and really just kind of wanted to take a moment to go through that with you guys. Thank you for tuning in to this bonus episode. As Mike and I talked about this past week, we will be back next Wednesday to talk about inequality and economics and what does it mean to live out an equally economic system. Is that attainable? Is it achievable? What should we be going after? So I'm really looking forward to being able to bring that episode to you guys next week. But until then, you've now heard The Other Side.
Thanks for listening. And remember, you're not fully informed until you've heard The Other Side.